Thank you for joining us today for 10 Minutes with the Artist, an episodic series that explores the art practice and the personal vision that guides artists. On today's episode, we're very proud to have Zach Moen, who's completing his master's in architecture at North Dakota State University. We invited him here today to speak about his research and the creation of artifacts in preparation of his defense. Invisible Bleach examines the unnoticed collateral damage of World War II while attempting to build connections between three places, Chicago, Berlin, and Hiroshima, that were once irreparably divided. Zach's artifact endeavors to move beyond memory and create an empathy that transcends borders, people, and history. My name is Anthony Ferris, and this is 10 Minutes with the Artist. Thank you, Zach, for joining us for 10 Minutes with the Artist. So, I could agree that we shouldn't forget about events like World War II, but the truth is I actually don't remember it because I wasn't alive during that time. So, I've read about it, I've heard stories about it. I was curious if there's other ways to remember things than actually experiencing them.
I would say that is exactly how we try and do remember things, but I think we cannot actually repeat that memory in a sense. We can't actually feel what they felt. But the point is to embody that feeling of loss inside you that you do when you remember something about World War II, or you do when you watch a video, or you do when you see that painting that kind of takes you back in time, yet you still get that loss, that lump in your throat about that image or that video. And I think that's what's really important when we do think of the loss of World War II.
You know, I remember seeing the Execution in the Streets of Saigon by Eddie Adams, and I remember looking at that photograph and saying, that's not real, because I couldn't believe that there was actually that sort of horror in the world. And then I saw a video of it, and there was no way for me to ignore it. I'm just kind of curious if there's ways that people sort of connect with things in that very visceral.
I would say that experience that you don't believe that it's real is the precise reason why it needs to be brought out, and I think that's at the heart of this artifact and this project, is that exact feeling that you do get, that the fiction that it creates, or the unreality, if that makes sense, of how disgusting or how brutal that time is. I think that moment needs to be felt throughout the world, and I think that's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Well, you have this really good quote, and the quote says, "We're more likely tied to the invisible than the visible." Why does an idea like that hold value to you?
Sure. So that's a quote by Marco Frescari that I read in his book Monsters of Architecture, and it really held to me because the invisible, I think, is, again, back to what you were talking about, that feeling that you don't quite understand, that it just doesn't feel real because it's that real. And I think that is the invisible. That's what's hidden, what people don't quite understand, but it's what we feel the most rather than looking at an image or watching a video. I think that the invisible part is what is most recognizable.
So there's this transition that happens in your work between a solid and this soft ash, and I can't necessarily tell which is which until I put my hand in the piece. How does that help me understand your work a little bit better, that there is that sort of difference?
Sure. I think that difference, in my mind, is the difference between the invisible and the invisible, and then you participating with it, you putting your hand in the concrete, you are completing the picture. You are bridging the gap between your feelings and emotions and what you see around you. So that participation that you are in that the artifact, or that piece of architecture or space is the finishing picture, and it really engulfs you in the situation rather than just being there. It makes you a part of it.
It's funny because I feel like there's an element of empathy that could also go along with it. Is that important?
Absolutely. I think that might be the most important thing, is that the empathetic part of it. Just again to help people understand what maybe we don't understand, and maybe I still don't even understand it. But that feeling that we are those people. You know, we are the people that lost their lives due to the collateral damage of World War II. So that level of empathy is needed for this project to be successful.
So there's 3 different monuments, and there's 3 different places that I could interact with in the artifact, but I can't interact with all of them at the same time. Why is that important?
So what I'm trying to do there is to signify that I'm trying to connect this project and the artifact on a larger scale than what's in front of us, more precisely around the world. So because you can't participate with one, but what others are doing on the other 2 sites or locations or in the artifact is the same thing you are doing. So there's this simultaneity between what you're doing and what they're doing that bridges the gap of connection. So you are actually in the same place they are, or you are doing the same thing they're doing across the world.
You know, I can understand and appreciate this idea of sort of like shared humanity, but there were very different sort of like cultural things that were happening in each of these different places. Am I made to sort of like understand what was going on in that specific area, or should I just think about the wider human condition?
So specifically in each project located in Chicago, Hiroshima, and Berlin, they are all site-specific to a particular that happened at that event or at that location. So by doing that, you will grasp what happened at that city and at that location. But by doing that, it will connect you to what happened in the lateral city or the lateral space, because they're all connected with each other, and each event plays a part with each event. And it has this back and forth element to the project.
There's this thing that I think is really interesting, which is I came into the gallery and I saw that some child or somebody had walked through the ashes. And at first I was sort of like surprised and like, who would do that? But then again, there was an element of comfort and connection with it that obviously they felt.
Sure.
You know? So how do you feel about people interacting with your work that way?
I think that's great. I think I want it to do that, and I think it adds to the patina of what is already patinaed. It ages it in a sense that it's not aged at all. I mean, if a child just steps on it now, obviously it's in the present, but it adds that element where that could have happened that much, that long ago, or in that time period. It kind of places time into the artifact.
So at the very end of our discussion, we like to ask a few questions about your creative practice.
Okay.
So what time of day do you feel like you're most creative?
I feel like I'm most creative towards the end of the late evening, I suppose. Anytime really after dinner, I like to sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and sort of embrace the darkness, if that makes sense, like where there isn't as much light, and just be one with what I'm doing. And I guess that's when I'm most creative.
Yeah. Do you listen to music or anything like that when you're making your work?
You know, it varies. I listen to music. Sometimes I listen to podcasts. Sometimes I can't stand volume or any type of music at all. White noise helps sometimes. I guess it just kind of depends on what I'm doing, the mood, and where I'm at.
Are you reading anything right now?
I am reading. I'm reading a book. It's called 1776. It's a Revolutionary War book. I'm a history guy, so I like to read anything I can get my hands on in history.
Yeah. And how do you know that you're finished with a piece?
I I think when you're finished with it, you're always going to want to go back and do more. So I think there is no finished element to that. I think you're just always going to want to make changes, and you're always going to want to make your things better. But finishing work is important, and I think it takes a lot of courage to tell yourself that your project or your piece is finished. But I don't think you can. I don't think there's a definitive answer to that, Anthony. I think it's just kind of you feel when it's finished, and I don't think that can be answered.
Yeah. And then I guess my last question would be, what's next for you?
What's next in terms of the artifact, or in terms of school, or what do you mean? What's next for me?
Maybe what's happening right after this video. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. What's next for me? I'm actually got some more artifact development and project development to get into, and then the military is what's next for me. After school, I'm actually going to do some military duties. So,
well, Zach, thank you so very much for joining us today to talk about your work. And I would like to thank you all for your interest and your time in the professional practice and the creative explorations happening here at North Dakota State University. So thank you for everyone here at the Memorial Union Gallery. Keep creative.